Salam, and welcome to the People of Palestine podcast. I'm your host, Saja al-Wishahi. Welcome back to the People of Palestine podcast. Today, I'm joined by Bashar Zeedan, who will be telling us a little bit about his family's story. So, Bashar, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Saja. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you
Great.
for documenting this,
Yeah,
archiving us.
absolutely. I'm happy to do it. Bashar, can you tell us where in Palestine your family hails from?
Okay, so my father comes from Tulkarem,
Mm-hmm.
from a little village next to Tulkarem called Ramin.
Okay,
And my mother comes from Haifa.
great. And did the Nakba affect your family at all?
I mean, did any Palestinian family didn't feel it? I think it affected both my father's side and my mother's side.
Mm-hmm.
On my father's side, my grandfather used to live. Although he's from Tulkarem, he used to live in Haifa, and
Mm-hmm.
my grandmother from my father's side is from Haifa as well. So in 1948, he had to flee Haifa. Basically, he was displaced with my grandmother and my two older uncles. One of
Mm-hmm.
them was only like a years old, and the other was 4 or 5. So he fled to Tulkarem, where his family is, and ended up in a refugee camp because he basically didn't have a house there and everything. All his life was in Haifa, so he ended up in Tulkarem refugee camp, where my
Mm-hmm.
father was born.
Mm-hmm.
And on my mother's side, my grandfather from Haifa, they fled in 1948. My great grandfather sent his family to Gaza, and from Gaza they moved to Cairo,
Mm-hmm.
and my grandmother was from Yafa.
Mm-hmm.
They as well moved on the same route to Gaza, and from Gaza to Cairo. That's where they met, and where my mother was born in Cairo.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I know for a lot of families, it's either they were affected during the Nakba in 1948 or they didn't feel it until 1967. So making that differentiation, I think, is really important. So your parents ended up in Cairo. That's where they met, correct?
No, actually,
Okay.
it gets more complicated because my,
Okay.
my father was born in Tulkarem in the refugee camp, and
Mm-hmm.
he was one of the lucky one of 7 of his siblings who
Mm-hmm.
managed to get an education. So he moved to Jordan,
Okay.
and he studied in the University of Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and after he graduated, he moved to Kuwait to work
Okay.
in Kuwait. My father was an English teacher at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So he moved to Kuwait and he worked in Kuwait. In parallel, my grandfather and my grandmother who met in Cairo, they had my mother and they had one of my uncles, and then
Mm-hmm.
they moved to Kuwait as well.
Okay.
Because Kuwait was the place where Palestinians go in the 50s, 60s. It
Mm-hmm.
was a welcoming country, still is, for
Mm-hmm.
Palestinians, and that's where my mother and father met in Kuwait. My father used to do like after hours extra work in
Mm-hmm.
uh, giving English lessons to like older people, like older students.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother was one of his students,
That's
so it
cute.
was like kind of a love story, yeah.
Yeah.
And then they got married in Kuwait in
Mm-hmm.
1981.
Mm-hmm. And then how many siblings do you have?
So I am one of 4. I have an older sister, Ruba,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a younger brother, Bilal, and a younger sister, Dana. So
And were you all
3
born
of
in
us
Kuwait?
were, no, actually, Ruba, me, and Bilal were born in Kuwait.
Okay.
And then we moved to Jordan in 1991, following the Gulf War,
Mm-hmm.
of course. It feels like it's a destiny for Palestinians to keep moving because of wars. So we
Yeah.
moved to Jordan, and that's where my younger sister was born a year later in 92.
Yeah. So, and then how many years did you stay in Jordan?
So I lived in Jordan between 91 and 2006.
Okay.
In 2006, and I did my like undergrad in Jordan. I studied in
Mm-hmm.
Hashemite University. I did my
Mm-hmm.
degree in accounting and commercial law,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked in Jordan for like a year and a half after I graduated, and then I moved to the UK. I moved to Manchester.
Wow. Yeah. Your story sounds very familiar to me. I'm sure to other Palestinians. Yeah, I don't think it's really hard for the idea of settling down for a Palestinian is really hard. I think you can relate maybe that it feels like you don't belong
Yeah.
anywhere. So
That's true,
yeah,
and moving feels easier.
yeah,
You don't feel like you're being uprooted when you move. You've already been uprooted,
yeah.
so no matter how deep your roots are anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
uh, they're not that deep. You can always like feel, although you still love and relate to those places you lived in, but you
Yeah,
don't feel like you've been uprooted or it was a drastic decision.
yeah.
Uh, I mean, when I moved to the UK, I already had family in Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait,
Mm,
United Arab Emirates, Germany, New Zealand, uh, Syria, Palestine. So it wasn't like I wasn't like the odd one in the family. We were
yeah,
already all over the place. So I've just added a new destination.
yeah, that's true. So on that note, how was life for your family outside of Palestine, especially for your parents? Did they talk about what it was like to live outside of Palestine?
I mean, for my mother, she doesn't have that memory because she never lived in
Mm-hmm.
Palestine. She was born in Cairo, and then she lived most of her life then in Kuwait. So she used to hear the stories from my grandfather and grandmother, and
Yeah.
boy, they were nostalgic. I mean, everything I've learned, and I think most Palestinians
Mm-hmm.
about Palestine, and even this nostalgic romantic relationship comes from our grandparents
Yeah.
because they lived there, and they're the ones who were left with the trauma, with the memories, with the so they always talked about it. My father, on the other side, lived in Palestine. He was born in Palestine,
Mm-hmm.
and even when he moved to Jordan, he like dropped out a couple of times to go back to Palestine, and then my grandfather like convinced him to carry on because
Mm-hmm.
it's the place he knows. It's the place he relates to. It's where his family is. So he talked about it a lot as well. Um, but there are like different experiences. My grandparents lived like a really good life uh,
Yeah.
before Nakba. So when they talk about it, their memories are of beautiful things of the city, of what they used to do, of their land, of oranges in Yafa or the sea in Haifa, and these things. And my father's experience was a bit harsher because he was born into a refugee camp, and he was born like in the occupation, so he felt those things more, and he lived until he became like 18 under this
Mm-hmm.
occupation. So I always had different perspectives in my memory about how was life before, how was life during the occupation, how was life pre 67, after 67.
Yeah.
And you know, because they talk about it a lot, you feel like you're part of it. You feel like it's your own memory or experience.
Yeah.
It's like something that's passed down generations.
Yeah, that's true. And I know you have a daughter, so how do you keep Palestine alive for her?
Oh, well, first of all, her name is Palestine. So
Oh, that's
I,
so beautiful.
yeah, so I named her Palestine because I mean, I don't want to sound very poetic about it, but I come from a poetic family. We're
Yeah,
all
yeah.
like hopelessly, helplessly romantic about Palestine. So I felt like we're being erased from history somehow.
Hmm.
There's active institutional efforts to erase us,
Yeah.
especially after living in the West. I saw how hard it is to just even say Palestine and be recognized, as
Hmm.
Palestine. There's like 6 million names for us apart from Palestine, the occupied territories, the Palestinian
Yeah.
occupied territories, things like that. So, and then with the social media and with the Facebook, Instagram, things like that, the censorship, the banning, these things, I felt like they can ban everything. They can ban content, they can ban
Hmm.
anything, but they can't ban names. They can't
Yeah,
ban your name. So I
that's
thought
true.
maybe if I call her Palestine, she has the right to have her name anywhere. And
So beautiful.
yeah, and she'll always have the opportunity to talk about it when like she's being asked what's we always get asked like what's the meaning of your name, and
Mm.
so she'll have an amazing story to tell,
Yeah.
and to be honest, sometimes I think that it'll save her a lot of um, negativity with people,
Mm.
because at face value people will either like her or dislike her. She'll know that she doesn't have to go through
Yeah.
people with two faces, and she doesn't have to really stick around people who hate Palestine.
Yeah. That's so that's such a beautiful way to keep it alive is let me just name her Palestine. That's so it's so strong. How old is she now?
She's 3.5.
Oh, she's 3.5. She's so young. So,
Yeah. Well, I
yeah.
mean, this has been one of like my lifelong dreams. I
Mm.
mean, for as far as I remember, I think maybe I was 12 when I decided like I'll have a daughter one day, and I'll name her Palestine. And
Yeah.
it's probably one of the only things that I managed to achieve after all
Yeah.
of these years. From I kept this dream, and
Yeah.
it sort
Yeah.
of worked. And
That's
yeah,
beautiful. Yeah,
thank
I know for me when I was younger, the way that my parents kept it alive for me was the first thing I learned how to say in Arabic, of course, was my name. So they would be like, "What's your name?" And I'd be like, "Saja al-Wishahi min Palestine." And so that was like the way
yeah.
that they kept it alive, and it was so ingrained in my head that way. So that's beautiful that you just
Yeah.
named her Palestine, and she doesn't have to do the work
Yeah,
after that.
I mean, it got a bit confusing for her, but
Yeah,
she's young. So I remember
yeah.
like funny things 6 months ago or 7 months ago, she was like still speaking
Yeah.
early and making up sentences and hearing music. And like we came to Jordan, and my
Hmm.
sister was speaking to her like, "What's your name?" And she goes, "Palestine." So what's your full name? And she goes, "Palestine Arabiya." Because she hears that song, so she thought that like it's a package.
That's so cute.
Yeah. So now
Uh,
she knows, like she knows now I'm Palestinian Zeedan. She knows that.
that's so cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned some things about like being censored and the way that the world views us, and I wanted to ask you if you have ever experienced personally any sort of racism or any discrimination because you're Palestinian.
I mean, yeah, you can't escape this in Europe. But let me just start by saying the UK
Mm.
pre 7th of October was one of the better countries in terms of your right in celebrating your ancestry, your
Mhm.
roots, and you always get the odd incident where oh, where is that, and it doesn't exist, or things like that, where we're kind of genetically trained to
Yeah.
discuss these things with people, but the you feel it when you fill a form, or you go through something official, and then you don't find Palestine in the drop down list, things like
Yeah.
that. People think it's silly, but it's not. I mean, you have countries that barely exist on the map, like a few
Yeah.
100 kilometers, and Micronesia or Tuvalu, those countries, and they have full recognition, while you have a country and a nation and a history, and you're not even recognized on a drop down list.
Yeah.
Uh, so um, that was upsetting,
Hmm.
but again, in the UK, there's a strong Palestinian presence.
Yeah.
Uh, Palestinians have been there forever, I think,
Hmm.
and you always have this community around, so you didn't feel uh, that you're like not known, or whoever comes speaks to you didn't come across a Palestinian before, or have read it in the news, or have seen
Hmm.
something about it. Najil Ali was in London, so
Hmm.
they know who we are.
Yeah.
And up until I think 7th of October, they understood, or they were what can I say, lenient in
Hmm.
the way that they allow us, or not really allow us. We're practicing our rights,
Yeah.
so they even if they didn't like it, they couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
I think, but post 7th of October, and it's not only the UK, I think the whole world, things have changed.
Hmm.
Uh, Things have changed to a more confrontational thing, more censorship, and maybe more xenophobic, racist, whatever you
Hmm.
want to call it. Uh, because I think there's something very dangerous that's happening in the UK and in Europe, is coupling being pro-Palestinian with being
Yeah.
anti-Jewish or
Yeah.
anti-Semitic, whatever. And I think that's where we need to work, because on decoupling this, because not every pro-Palestinian hates Jews. I don't think we hate Jews, and they need
No.
to, I think they understand that we do, but it's the easiest thing to sell in
Yeah.
the name of protecting a certain minority.
Yeah.
You have to oppress another,
Yeah.
or you have to censor another. So
Yeah. And yeah, and I think a lot of people confuse the Palestinian struggle as a religious one, and it's not. It has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with the institution of Zionism and occupation and kicking people off of the land for the benefit of creating a new country. It has nothing to do with religion, and unfortunately, the media and spins it that way to make it seem like it's
yeah,
all
I mean,
about,
we did a lot of disservice to this. I mean, not
yeah,
we, me, and you, but the Arabs as well,
yeah, yeah.
the Muslims, and the associations of it. It's always been a cause of freedom, a cause of
Mm-hmm.
liberation. That's why we were very much interconnected with most of those liberation movements around the world,
Yeah.
because it was the same thing. We shared the same thing. I think there was mistakes in history where it became like an Islamic thing or an
Mm-hmm.
Arab thing,
Mm-hmm.
and that allowed non-Muslims or non-Arabs to be relieved of the burden.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not our issue. It's not. I mean, Muslims are not doing anything about it. Why would I? Or Arabs are not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
But when it used to be, and it still is, a liberation cause, a freedom
Mm-hmm.
cause, a self-determination cause for us.
Yeah.
Everyone on planet Earth is concerned. It should be burdened with this. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
who has a voice should use it, because it's a human thing before anything else. And the problem for us now is because the world, some parts of the world, consider us less of a human
Yeah.
than them. So
Yeah.
that's the thing. So I think what happened post 7th of October, no matter what people have opinions about it or thoughts about it,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something. One of the takeaways is that it put our cause back on the front page,
Yeah.
and it made a lot of people think, why would anyone do that? Why would this happen? Why is it still happening? And it gained this traction that it should
Mm-hmm.
have gained ages ago.
Mm-hmm.
And to be bluntly honest, I think
Yeah.
we've tried a lot with the Arabs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's time for the world to realize it's a world issue, not only the Arabs.
Yeah.
The Arabs are mostly driven now by political gains and by political games, and
Yeah.
but it has to become a world thing,
Yeah.
and I think we're back into being a global, international issue
Mhm.
where you have people. I doubt there is anywhere in the world now where they don't know Palestine.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
so
Especially
there's
now with social media and you know, the younger generation of Palestinians are coming out and doing a lot of advocacy and going to protests and doing all of these things. And yeah, it's like front and center. And if you don't know Palestine, you're kind of living under a rock at this point,
exactly,
you know?
exactly.
So
It's
yeah.
a voluntary ignorance now.
Yep,
It's
exactly. Exactly. So I wanted to ask you your personal kind of migration story. You did your undergrad in Jordan and then you went to the UK. And what does your personal success story look like?
well. I think as I said, I moved really young to
Hmm.
the UK. I was lucky to have a job when I moved. Like I moved with, I used to work for an Arabic company, a Jordanian company that
Hmm.
was expanding around Europe.
Hmm.
So I moved with them, and I spent quite a long time with them. And I'd be I'm happy to claim that I was part of the success story of that they had probably 2000% growth in Europe, and during that time I
Hmm.
was lucky to work in several European countries because it was expanding in Europe, and I was there in the right time so I managed to work in places like Ireland,
Hmm.
Netherlands, Malta, Spain, France, Italy, Slovakia, Czech
That's
Republic.
great. Yeah.
So I think I gained a lot of knowledge and learning and
Hmm.
experience in these places. And then when I decided to leave, I started my own business.
Hmm.
Me and my wife, we opened an online Arabic bookstore that's targeting Europe and North America mainly. Because I mean, I'm a bookworm. I love
Yeah.
reading, and every time I come on a holiday, when I'm back, there's like 10, 15 kilos of my luggage books
Wow.
because we couldn't find them in London.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe this is something that the world needs. I mean,
Hmm.
the Arab community needs. Books will never be out of fashion,
That's
and
true.
it's important to preserve language, preserve, especially when you see younger generations. I mean, it
Hmm.
hurts me to see younger generations of Arabic descent don't speak Arabic, don't even know how to speak Arabic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of the parents think it's cool. I mean,
Hmm.
uh, but some others are really struggling in finding learning aids and preserving this. So we thought this is something we should do. So we did,
Yeah.
and we've had huge success. Really, we were one of the very few, if not the only ones, who could
Hmm.
get source these titles and sell them all over Europe and North America. And so that was something I'm really proud of. We're still doing
Amazing,
that.
mashallah.
And after that, I was headhunted for a job. I thought
Hmm.
it was a prank at the beginning, but then it turned out to be like in the central government of
Hmm.
the UK.
Hmm.
I worked for a department for the treasury basically,
Hmm.
and I mean it took 3 months for my security clearance, but eventually I did get it,
Yeah.
and I worked there, and I got to see
Hmm.
the big machine,
Hmm.
how those great countries work, how these institutions operate,
Hmm.
and because I always have this critical thinking,
Yeah.
uh, it was great for me to see, not to admire a certain model,
Hmm.
but to see really where are we going wrong. I
Yeah.
mean, I got the experience of working with Arabic countries and with
Hmm.
European countries, and the difference is not in the genetics of people. It's the differences in the
Mm-hmm.
way things are done,
Mm-hmm.
in the rule of law, in the organization, in the system, in standardization, in models and policies.
Yeah.
So it was a great experience. I worked for almost 4 years
Mm-hmm.
with them, and I got to learn really a lot about it. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I'm currently working with startups, and I do advisory and consultancy.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I feel my success story is really is doing this. It's paving my own way
Mm-hmm.
somewhere new without any help, without any support, and getting to work for private sector, public sector,
Mm-hmm.
startups, voluntary work, and on a, a national front or on a patriotic front. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like the most pride I have is in the activism work that we did in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
When I moved there, it wasn't that big, it wasn't that
Yeah.
active.
Mm-hmm.
It had an amazing infrastructure. There were people there, and there were institutions like Palestine Solidarity Campaign,
Mm-hmm.
Stop the War, and all of these amazing people who are doing great work. And funny enough, I mean, when they started, they were Palestinians who started these things.
Yeah.
But down down the line, I mean, if you
Mm-hmm.
look at the board of directors of them, 95% of them are English,
Mm-hmm.
white English. So I
Yeah.
think we managed uh, to really, I don't want to use the word recruit, but we managed
Yeah.
to really get our message truly across,
Mm-hmm.
and make people adopt our narrative
Mm-hmm.
and our story,
Mm-hmm.
and do the work that maybe sometimes we shy of doing, or worry about doing, because
Mm-hmm.
you're a foreigner, you're brown. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter if you have a passport or not, or you have a nationality or not,
Yeah.
you're still labeled. I mean, no matter how you talk about the West, it always had this unconscious bias, and now
Mm-hmm.
it's
Conscious.
it's conscious.
Yeah, it's conscious.
So and I felt that before the
Mm-hmm.
7th of October. I mean, when I was in the UK, when the Ukraine-Russia war
Mm-hmm.
broke out,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw it firsthand. I saw firsthand how, I mean, I've in my life in the UK, I've always worked around refugees.
Yeah.
Not because I'm kind-hearted. We are Palestinians. We'll always work with refugees. Our friends
Yeah.
will be refugees.
Yeah.
They speak, most of the refugees speak our language, because the most of the shit is happening in our countries. I mean,
Yeah.
so I always had like Iraqi friends, Syrian friends,
Mm-hmm.
Lebanese friends. Those communities, I used to be around them, and there was always work related to refugees that you'd happily volunteer and do it,
Right.
because you come from one of the, like, in the modern history, the oldest and the biggest number of refugees. I mean,
Right.
I'm still a refugee according to the
Mm-hmm.
UN. I have the card.
Yeah.
So for us, it wasn't like charity.
Mm-hmm.
It was a duty.
Right.
So we worked a lot with refugees. I mean, I remember, like, even taking drives down to Calais in France to
Mm-hmm.
deliver diapers and things
Mm-hmm.
like that for refugees at post the
Mm-hmm.
Arabic Spring and the
Yeah.
civil wars that broke out in Libya, Syria, and
Mm-hmm.
so many of those countries. Uh, and I used to see how the white people couldn't care less. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
some of them did, but most of them couldn't care less, and they saw it as a burden. Like, why would we open the borders? Why would we do this? And
Right.
I saw these narratives, and I was there when Brexit happened, and
Mm-hmm.
Brexit happened because it was people were manipulated. I mean, racist, semi-racist, xenophobic people were manipulated that this is going to stop the immigration. We're going to control our borders and our borders, and really, some of them thought that, like, they're blocking me and you.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't realize that they're blocking Europeans.
Yeah.
It was that shallow level of
Yeah.
racism,
Yeah.
xenophobia. Um, But when the Russia-Ukraine war broke out, I saw a different kind of reaction. You know, the reaction that you'd see in Jordan or in Lebanon or in
Mm-hmm.
Egypt when an Arab country
Goes through something.
goes through something.
Yeah.
They were committed. They were like,
Mhm.
those are our people. They look like us. They're
Yeah.
edgy. They're white. They have blue eyes. And
Yeah.
that was like shocking
Mm-hmm.
because you've had 50 years of an opportunity to be nice to refugees. You only decided to do it when they're white.
Yeah.
So there wasn't hiding it. They couldn't hide it.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of them were shocked with their reality
Yeah.
because as long as these things happen when you have a good social welfare and you're making good
Mm-hmm.
money and there are no issues in your life, you tend to be kinder and you don't care and. But
Yeah.
when the going gets tough, people
Mm-hmm.
truly show subconscious things. Some of
Yeah.
them were conscious but suppressed, and then suddenly it's out there, and
Mm-hmm.
it was shocking. It was disgusting at some points, to be honest. It was.
Yeah.
I went through so many debates with people at work and outside work and things like that about the issue, and like why, and when they come and speak to you about why are you not doing something for Ukraine? Why are you not talking about it?
Mm-hmm.
Just have to. You stand there and like the irony of it is unreal. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, And then you look at them and say, but where have you been for 75 years, for example? Like you're talking to a refugee.
Yeah.
So don't try to lecture us about this. You only pick and choose who to do that. As a matter of fact, we treated Jews as refugees when they came to Palestine.
Yeah.
So so we have a history of this, and we have a history of
Mm-hmm.
migration and of moving around. So yeah, it became really horrible. And then 7th of October, and now they feel that they have a license to hate you, and they have a license uh, to talk or to hurt your cause.
Yeah.
And they swallowed this propaganda and they decided to go with it. They believe the clock started ticking on the 7th of October. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so I think we have a good opportunity of
Mm-hmm.
doing good work really on the long run,
Mm-hmm.
and these things will happen. I mean, eventually it'll happen. As I said before, people are people. There is no
Yeah.
genetic difference.
Yeah.
I think for us, I mean, for us as Palestinians, most of us are very much adaptable. We can live
Mm-hmm.
anywhere. We can manage ourselves anywhere, and we can easily integrate into any kind of society. And we do that without dissolving or diluting who we are.
Yeah.
I think we're great at this. I think
Yeah.
we're
I think
probably
we
in the
haven't we have no
top. top.
choice, right? I
Yeah,
feel like we
yeah.
don't have a choice. But going back to what you were saying about Ukraine and the irony between what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Palestine, it's I remember like going driving to work in the morning when the war broke out between Russia and Ukraine, and they on the way to work there was a bridge and somebody put the Ukrainian flag and the US flag next to each other. I was like, okay, The next day I drove past that bridge again, and on the other side of the American flag somebody put the Palestinian flag. And so immediately I saw it from a few miles away. So I as I
Mhm.
got closer, I took a picture and I sent it to my family. I was like, look, and I got so excited. A week goes by, and every time I would drive past, I would just smile because the Palestinian flag was on display. But a week goes by, and I drove past it again, and somebody had gone and ripped the Palestinian flag into shreds and just kept it hanging there. And I remember just my internal reaction to it was just like, it was like somebody took my heart and just like crushed it. And it's like, okay, but like we're people too. Just because we have brown skin doesn't mean that we're not humans. The same thing is happening in Palestine, and but it's okay for the world to back Ukraine and help Ukraine and do all of these things, but we're left in the dust. And then October 7th happened, and where are we
Yeah,
now? Nothing. So,
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, but this everything about our cause is ironic somehow.
mm,
Wherever you live, because hypocrisy has reached certain levels that
yeah,
uh, خلاص, it can't be justified in any other way.
yeah,
And the world is changing in a crazy way. I mean, there are good people everywhere, and I think we worked with a lot of good people. I remember when, like, I can't even, you see the irony even in the feelings that you want to feel. You don't
yeah,
know what to feel.
yeah,
You want to feel proud or happy or sad or anything. But
yeah.
I mean, I remember in 2014 we organized that demonstration
Mm-hmm,
when there was another war on Gaza, of course.
mm-hmm,
Uh, so I remember we took, because in the UK, if you want to go on a demo and you
mm-hmm,
want to stand somewhere, you don't need to get a license. You just call the police and you inform them that you're going to
mm-hmm,
be
mm-hmm.
standing somewhere. So our usual spot was, like, the Israeli embassy, outside the Israeli embassy.
Right.
Uh, and we thought, like, yeah, we'll probably have a big turnout today, maybe
Mm-hmm,
5, 10,000.
mm-hmm,
So we were working actively for a week, 10 days. Everyone's speaking to the people they know. We're organizing, we're printing
mm-hmm,
banners and things like that.
mm-hmm.
And on the day, there was over 250,000 people. People kept flooding from everywhere.
Yeah.
And then they decided that they want to walk
Mm-hmm.
to 10 Downing Street, which means that you have to go across the whole of the capital
Right.
on a Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the touristic areas, that's the weekend, that's everything. And then the police were coming to the organizers, to us, and like, you can't walk because you don't have a license. And they're like, how do you want me to control 200,000 people?
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't ask them to walk. They decided to walk. They'll walk. And that's the power of people when they claim the streets, when no one rules the streets but the people in the streets.
Yeah.
But I remember, like, and I was happy about that record. Like, that was a record in the history of London, like having 260,000 people marching for Palestine. That was a record. Uh, until this happened and we saw 1 million people marching. So it's ironic, like, your record has been broken, but not for something that you're happy about. I mean, you'd rather not break the record and not have a genocide.
Right. Right.
So it's confusing. I think we have a lot of feelings to deal with
Yeah.
when this ends in any way. But I think we have a lot to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, I mean, you have amidst all of this, you have 1 million people marching in London for you. You have amazing numbers coming out. So uh, I don't think that. I mean, I think we won already this war.
Yeah.
We're losing our people, amazing people, innocent people.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so, and I mean, I can't sit here and lecture people who are paying the price, really, of their blood and houses and children.
Right.
But I still think, like, no matter what the occupation does, they've
Mm-hmm.
already lost the war.
Yeah. It's
So
hard. It's hard for them to come back after this, especially like I just every time that the new piece of propaganda was coming out, especially in the beginning in like October or something, and they would make a mistake, I would just
yeah,
laugh. I was like, this is God like exposing them, like the one that I remember very clearly is when they took the milk carton and they put the hostages like images on the milk cartons, but then they didn't take away the expiration date of the milk carton was like from 2021. Like like these
yeah, yeah. I mean,
stupid
they're
mistakes is like who did you hire to be on your
yeah,
like
yeah.
PR, you
I
know?
think. I
So
think
drunk.
we've always been on the back foot because we always used to say about the enemy that they proactively plan things and they
Mm-hmm.
have 100 years long plans and
Right,
they
right,
have
right.
master plans and they have everything. And I think this is probably for the first time where we put them on the reactionary side where
Right. Yeah.
they're reacting and they don't know what they're doing and they normally need like few months to prepare for a campaign and now
Right.
suddenly they have
They
this.
can't, they
So
have to just, yeah, produce nonstop,
exactly.
right? Because,
Exactly. And
yeah.
there's a very important aspect in this is when you do propaganda and you lie, you need to go through a lot of effort.
Yeah, it's true.
But for us, we're not lying, so we're not doing propaganda. We're telling the truth, and our
Yeah.
truth is very powerful. That their
Yeah.
propaganda cannot really keep up. You can't make up stuff, and that's part of what's happening is that maybe worse things happened in history. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
I mean humankind. I'm not fond of the humankind. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they've done worse to the planet than good. Uh, but this is probably the first one that's televised.
Yeah.
So they can't escape this. I mean, they're the benchmark
Mm-hmm.
of genocidal maniacs. They're the
Yeah.
benchmark of aggression, the
Mm-hmm.
benchmark of violence, of cruelty.
Yeah.
Uh, Anyone who'd use a benchmark would be this after now.
Yeah.
So good luck coming back from that. Good luck with your PR of trying to tell the world that you're peaceful and you're nice and
Yeah. And they're doing it from far away too, it's like virtual propaganda work, whereas like what we're showing is on the ground, like people on the ground had to have like eSIMs sent to them so that they had a way to show actually what's going on. So it's a very different approach. And it's not, like you said, it's not propaganda, it's actually what's happening.
it's really
Uh,
hard to bury a story that's written in blood,
yep.
simply. And we've given, I mean, Palestinians, Gazans in particular, have given a lot of blood to make sure that we're not erased from history, and we shall not be erased from history. But and even, I mean, in my time in London, I've met a lot of my friends are come from Gaza. They're the most amazing people. They're really the most life celebrating people. They overachievers. They really appreciate life. So yeah, I mean, you can't break those people. You can't. We talked in the beginning of how we heard this from our grandparents, but for people from Gaza, they have their own story. They've
Yep.
lived it. They saw it.
Yeah.
So the story continues, and you have. We were worried. I mean, I worked with some amazing people on a project a few years back, uh, interviewing Nakba survivors, just to make sure that you capture the stories, because a lot of people don't know how much of cultural genocide Israel did to us as well.
Hmm.
They've confiscated hundreds of thousands of books and scripts
Hmm.
when in the Nakba. It wasn't only people, and that was like a usual target for them. And because they tried to wipe us from history, we thought like we should work with these people and
Hmm.
document. Most of our history is self narrated
Yeah,
through
that's true.
eyewitnesses.
Hmm.
So that we wanted to document that and archive it, and that was easy for the Israelis sometimes to negate and say, oh, that never happened. You don't
Yeah.
have proof or something like that.
Yeah.
I think what's happening now is just simply making up for that. We have ton of
Yeah.
proof.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
they tried really hard. I know, especially my grandpa was tortured a lot because he was a history teacher in Palestine, and I think he was also a principal of a school, and they would anytime somebody was educated in that way, um they would torture that person and try to,
yeah,
yeah, take away their books and all of these things and try to suppress what was actually
Yeah,
happening. And so I think for every Palestinian, education is a weapon, right?
yeah,
Because they can't take that away from us ever. Um,
yeah. And
so
they can't take away our stories. That's the most
yeah,
important thing. I mean, somehow we moved. We talked a lot about politics, and we
yeah,
went
yeah.
away from the personal side. I mean, a lot of our stories say about them romantic or whatever, or
Mm-hmm,
but they are really the reason why we continue to believe, why we
mm-hmm,
strongly believe in the justice of our cause. I mean, I remember a story my father used to tell me when he was younger,
mm-hmm,
before he went to Jordan to study, when he was like a teenager.
mm-hmm.
Uh, he used to work in Israeli factories because at the time, most Palestinians used to work in those factories for a living.
Yeah.
He used to work in an ice cream factory. Um, and he was like the night shift because in the morning he's in
Mm-hmm,
school or something like that. And then he goes on the night shift, comes back at 2 or 3 in the morning
mm-hmm,
and to the refugee camp he's
mm-hmm,
living in, like Tol Karim, Mukhayyam Tol Karim. And he wakes up his siblings to
mm-hmm.
eat an ice cream he brought back with him from the factory because they didn't have
Yeah.
fridges and freezers.
Right.
And and when you think about it, like you think of how unjust this world is, where this is an ice cream factory that's making ice cream for Israelis, the occupiers, who go
Yeah.
to the supermarket and buy it,
Yeah.
made by the Palestinians who are occupied and who don't even have a fridge to keep
Mm-hmm,
it.
mm-hmm.
So, so these are the small stories that make you believe in the justice of your cause. It's not, I mean, on the news there's enough analysis, and in
Yeah.
politics there's enough analysis, and UN assembly meetings and UN
Mm-hmm.
uh, decisions and things like that. But the real stories are those personal stories.
Yeah.
And I remember until my grandmother passed away, she always had this romantic relationship with oranges.
Yeah.
They remind her of a certain era, of a
Mm-hmm,
certain time that she doesn't want to. They remind her of her father, who
mm-hmm,
was actually assassinated by the Israelis. I mean, my mother's grandfather,
mm-hmm. Allah
her,
yarhamah.
uh, thank you, her mother's father.
Yeah.
As I told you, he owned a big amount of land in Yafa and everything. And when the war happened, he sent his family to Cairo and he
Mm-hmm,
stayed.
mm-hmm,
And he contested the confiscation of his land in British courts at the time
mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm.
we were still under the British colonialism.
Yeah.
So he went to court with them because he had money. He could
Mm-hmm,
afford to go to
mm-hmm,
court.
mm-hmm,
And he did. And he went to the courts and he won in the court.
mm-hmm.
And as he was leaving the court, uh, two Zionist Haganah, or one of those
Mm-hmm.
militias, ran him over and assassinated him because they didn't. I mean,
Yeah.
they they wanted the land in any way or shape, or and they didn't care what they did about it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's, I mean, that's maybe a discussion for another time, where we're looking at what happened now, but in the like in the course of history, uh, you never know because they did a lot worse at the
Yeah.
beginning, and then now they're celebrated as heroes. So I mean the I think that's the conundrum that
Mm-hmm.
the Zionists have with us, is that they've done a lot to us
Mm-hmm.
and it's documented.
Yeah.
And if we only do what they did,
Then we would be
no more, no
labeled
less.
yeah, we
Yeah,
would be labeled the terrorists, the Muslim
exactly, exactly.
extremists, and blah 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 blah. But
But I think they're on very thin ice because there will come a time where people would call bullshit bullshit.
yeah,
They can't
I
keep.
hope so.
I mean, yeah,
I hope
there will
so.
be a time where people will.
Yeah. It's
Um,
it's yeah, you hear stories like this all the
what
time.
we can do is personalize it.
Yeah.
So personalizing our story, telling those stories. I mean, at the end of the day, people would relate to your own personal story than a
Hmm.
piece of news.
Right.
Uh, and that's why it was, I think, for me and people like me who were in diaspora most of their
Hmm.
lives and who didn't have the opportunity to live in Palestine. Uh, the the main title, no matter how cliche it is being an ambassador of this cause.
Yeah.
And you can't imagine how many times this was the reason why me and many people like me didn't go into certain routes because we didn't think of ourselves. We thought that, what if I do this and then
Hmm.
we're labeled
Yeah.
like as Palestinians, and
Hmm.
you didn't want to tarnish this image.
Yeah.
So it made us, I think the cause made us better people and uh, had a toll on our like mental
Yeah.
wellness somehow.
Yeah.
It gave us a lot of resilience
Yeah.
and yeah, and it made us like take our story to places that would never reach on their own. I mean, when I worked in the first company in the UK, I used to go to remote towns and villages because the work was like physical transportation, logistics, and things like that. So I used to visit those offices. I visit places that I mean, I used to go to places where people in the UK, like, they've never even been to London, let alone talk about
Mm. Yeah.
the world.
Right.
And it's always exciting to go there and say I'm from Palestine. I mean,
Hmm.
and I remember in certain places, like I used to say I'm from Bethlehem because they
Mm.
wouldn't even know Palestine, but they know Bethlehem from the Bible and from
Yep.
Jesus.
Yep.
So you always say like I'm from Bethlehem, and I can't tell you how many times people were like fascinated, like you're telling a story, a biblical story, like they thought Bethlehem only existed in the Bible
Right.
and that it doesn't exist anymore. It's like Atlantis or something like that.
Yeah.
And when you tell them that it's there, it's actually there, but it's under occupation. Like you
Right.
have an opportunity to talk about your cause from
Yeah. Yeah.
different
Yeah.
perspectives. We don't
Yeah.
go there and say like we want liberation, we want that, because they don't even understand that. Maybe the first part you do is to assert your existence
Hmm.
in a world that's trying to erase you, to
Right.
pretend that you didn't exist. So I think that that was amazing for me. And I did that in the UK and in so many other
Hmm.
countries and in Europe that you really feel like when you come back that I've done something good today. Like I've
Yeah.
educated certain people about
Hmm.
this. If 1% of them goes and Googles this,
Yeah.
I've I've
Yeah.
I've done my like my message.
Do you do you ever get do you ever feel like it's a burden to teach other people about Palestine?
Mm, not a burden. I love doing it.
Hmm.
I feel disappointment sometimes that
Yeah.
that we still have to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, really, you feel disappointed because you want to take it to the next level.
Right.
You want to talk about more than back in 1948. You know,
Hmm.
that's our like chat up line
Right.
with everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah, you feel disappointment that, I mean, as we said in the beginning, like it's like voluntary ignorance. I mean,
Hmm.
what in the world has caused you to avoid this for this long?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um, but again, I mean, we love doing it because in places like Europe and the West, they've been told a different
Hmm.
story. Even those who know,
Yeah.
like those who know, have been told a complete different story.
Right.
And I think it's important to put out there your story,
Hmm.
not necessarily convince them, but at least make them know that there is a counter narrative.
Yeah. There's two sides.
There's a
Yeah.
completely different narrative,
Hmm.
and there's nothing I love more than debunking this Zionist narrative
Yeah.
of stories. Because it's like it's so fragile, it's laughable
Hmm.
sometimes to just debunk this whole myth that they come up with or came up with and managed to make it like the official story.
Yeah. One last question for you. Do you have hope to return to Palestine?
Of course,
Mm.
I mean, hope is takes a big part of our poetry.
Yeah.
There was a saying for I'll try to translate it if I can, for a Syrian writer
Mm-hmm.
called Saad Allah Wannous.
Mm-hmm.
And he said uh, الإنسان محكوم بالأمل.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have, call it, how would you translate that in English without losing the poetry of it? I mean, we're convicted with hope, if you
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
So, or Mahmoud Darwish said, نحن مصابون بأمل لا شفاء منه. I mean, we have a chronic hope. So
Mm-hmm.
he made it like a disease.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think in the face of what's happening and what I think what kept us going is hope.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it becomes really hard to have this hope,
Yeah.
and you just hate it. And I sometimes used to even use the term hope is the enemy of change, because if
Mm.
you have hope, you tend to sit and just hope for things to happen.
Right.
While I wanted people not to have hope and act, but if I didn't have hope, I wouldn't have named my daughter Palestine. I
That's
wouldn't
true.
have worked actively on visiting Palestine. I went
Mm-hmm.
in 2016 and I visited
Mm-hmm.
uh, the West Bank where I was allowed to go.
Yeah.
But the point is, yeah, I always had my dreams. Even it shaped a lot of my. It sometimes made me make bad decisions in terms of real estate, for example, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I always had this idea I wouldn't buy a house anywhere in the world, because if I buy a place here, I'm going to be settled here and I want to go back to Palestine.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I regret that decision on a financial side.
Yeah.
But yes, that's hope. That's the hope we have, and I think we will. And I don't think long enough. I think if I'm lucky, I'm gonna live to see it. But my
Yeah.
daughter will certainly see it.
Yeah.
I truly believe in
Inshallah.
that.
Yeah. One last question. Do you have a message for the people of Gaza?
I have a message for the people of Gaza. Yes, I mean, I, I don't have much words for them. Maybe my message to them is, we're sorry. I'm
Mm.
sorry that we can't do more. I'm really sorry that we can't share with you this agony and this
Mm.
aggression. I'm sorry that we can't shield your children with our bodies. I'm sure. I'm really sorry. I'm really
Mhm.
sorry. I don't think there's anything else we can do. I'm really sorry that we really that we can't be part of this. I'm really sorry that you're paying the price
Mm.
for all of us.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry, and and there's nothing more I can say than how much we're not only proud, because it's not didn't choose to be heroes.
Yeah.
They became heroes, but but we will forever be grateful
Mm-hmm.
for them and for their sacrifices, and I think they have special praise in in history and in heaven and
Mm-hmm.
in free Palestine, when Palestine is free.
Yeah.
They've earned it.
Yep. They have. That's a beautiful message. Bashar, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed our
Thank you,
conversation,
Saja. Me too.
and I hope we get to meet again soon, inshallah.
Hopefully
Yep.
we will.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.